Published in 1820 at the height of Romanticism, Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is the source of most pop culture depictions of the Headless Horseman. As a schoolteacher, Ichabod Crane lives humbly in the neighborhood of Sleepy Hollow within Tarrytown, a town plagued by the tales of the Headless Horseman. Having no house of his own and little food, Ichabod craves something more: wealth. Ichabod Crane aims to climb the social status ladder through marriage to Sleepy Hollow's most eligible bachelorette, Karina Van Tassel, whose father owns an abundance of the land in the county. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Washington Irving uses rich diction, vivid imagery, and personification of emotions to demonstrate the connections between greed and its consequences through the lenses of supernatural elements. Through the physical embodiment of internal thoughts, the effects of selfishness unravel throughout the short story, making the tale a cautionary narrative about the human subconscious. Throughout the novel, Ichabod Crane's lust for material wealth becomes personified in both physical objects and narration of his desires. Irving uses interesting but purposeful diction at the beginning of the short story to reveal the desires of Crane, using harsher adjectives like fat, rich, ruddy, and warm when describing the land of the Van Tassels. These words suggest more than that of the narrator listing physical objects, but display Crane's longing for something more, higher social status and property to call his own. These words also suggest that Crane is unsatisfied with his current life and has materialistic goals. Following the previous sentences, Irving mentions his desire to explore America, but includes the ending, setting out for Kentucky, Tennessee, or the Lord knows where. By emphasizing the Lord knows where, Irving reveals the impracticality of Ichabod's imagination. This impracticality stems from Ichabod lacking conscious intentions and instead wishing for an unattainable, undefined possible future. By illustrating unchecked ambition and obsession, Irving demonstrates how the human mind can lead to irrational, self-serving views on the world. Through Ichabod's intentions not being rooted in emotional or physical purpose, but rather the mere idea of having something to advance his social status, themes of greed spread throughout the short story. Irving continues the use of harsh adjectives and imagery when recounting the Van Tassel's estate to demonstrate the projection of greed onto physical objects. At the Van Tassel estate, the narrator states,
"Tender oly cook, and the crisp and crumbling cruller, sweet cakes and shortcakes, ginger cakes and honey cakes, and the whole family of cakes. And then there were apple pies and peach pies."
This not only demonstrates to the reader how wealthy the family is, but it also gives context to Ichabod's desires. The physical presence of endless amounts of desserts and fancier food can be connected to the life Ichabod wishes for himself. Although Ichabod will never eat all of this food, the point Irving demonstrates is that Crane wants it there, no matter the practicality of it. Irving uses supernatural elements to personify the consequences of greed and how it impacts the physical world. After being rejected on his way to wealth, Crane leaves the estate to go home, but on his way home, the weather and emotions of Ichabod become wearier, with Irving writing,
Darker and darker, the stars seemed to sink deeper in the sky, and driving clouds occasionally hid them from his sight. He had never felt so lonely and dismal.
The sky darkening and the limited instances of fear by Ichabod are only mentioned immediately following Ichabod's expression of his greed. Therefore, Irving uses pathetic fallacy to mirror Ichabod's internal thoughts and dismal state of mind with the weather of Sleepy Hollow. This helps the reader visualize the state of Crane's mind. Continuing the physical embodiment of greed, Irving includes the description of who attacks Ichabod at the end of the story, writing,
Was horror-struck on perceiving that he was headless.
By making the villain of the story headless, Irving mirrors Ichabod's constant lack of judgment and veil of greed displayed throughout the short story. Since Ichabod is too focused on himself and advancing his status, he lacks practicality and rational reasoning. Thus, it can be implied that Ichabod is senseless or headless. This connects to the overall theme of the novel that greed can take over oneself and lead to their downfall. In the concluding pages of the story, Irving leaves the ending of Ichabod Crane up for interpretation, but states all that the villagers could find was
found the hat of the unfortunate Ichabod, and close beside it a shattered pumpkin.
Although it may be popular thought to consider pumpkins to be associated with Halloween, the Halloween modern Americans know and its urban legends surrounding pumpkins did not arise until 1836, 16 years after Irving's publication, with the Dublin Penny Journal's publication of Stingy Jack. Instead, it can be suggested that the pumpkin is meant to symbolize something other than an element of Halloween. Pumpkins have been anthropomorphic objects since the 19th century, with many Celtic religions believing that they would ward off evil spirits. The use of the pumpkin in the legend of Sleepy Hollow can be seen as a message of greed failing an individual, as the pumpkin, used to symbolize banishing destructive behaviors and actions, was destroyed. Thus, it can be suggested that Ichabod's greed won in the end, and he suffered the consequences of that. In conclusion, the legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving uses personification and vivid imagery to display the greed of an individual. Through Ichabod Crane's uncontrolled desire for higher social status and assets, Irving shows that greed can change a person's perception of reality and lead to their downfall. Whether it is Ichabod's obsession with the Van Tassel estate or the eerie presence of the Headless Horseman, Irving demonstrates that greed is not just an internal issue, but one that can alter the environment and the events surrounding it. The story performs as a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting materialism and greed cloud one's judgment, showing that such desires can consume a person both mentally and physically. The ending symbolizes the fall of Ichabod's greed and leaves the reader to reflect on how personal ambition can result in the loss of identity. This can be seen in current events with political corruption with the intention of gaining and abusing power, to then, in the process, lose their moral compass and beliefs they ran on. The striving to become a leader and achieve a higher status has blinded politicians with an itch to become elected without regard to what they actually represent.